we're supposed to explore popular culture through novel Inkinsela yaseMgungundlovu, which is the PDF that she shared on WhatsApp, right? I believe some of you have known through the novel, even if you haven't went through the novel, you still participate in it, right? So, how many weeks have you been doing the series? 6. So, 7. So this is week 7. So, in your own understanding, with what you've done so far, what is your understanding of popular culture? What is popular culture?
Popular culture is, firstly, what I understand about it is that it's a Western concept.
Yeah.
It's not something that, it is a bit like, what can I say, broad when we explore it in African context, because our popular culture is our way of life, is our way of life, it's our daily routines, things we do on a daily basis. And our popular culture is different from the Western because it doesn't go on trends, but it becomes consistent.
Thank you. That's nice. Yes, you look like you want to say something. Yes. In your own understanding, what is popular culture? So, okay. Thank you for those wonderful responses. So, as we finish this session, you're supposed to be able to define popular culture, of which you have wonderfully done, and then understand how popular culture is used as a tool for resistance in the lens of Inkinsela yaseMgungundlovu, and then we analyze how Inkinsela yaseMgungundlovu can be perceived as one of the popular culture. Right. So, we have already discussed this one. So, according to Baba, popular culture is a product of everyday life, right? And then she characterized it as its dynamic, creative expression that emerges from ordinary people, right? And then she emphasizes that African culture shaped by the interplay of oral and written tradition, right? Okay, so, and then we have 2, as Bongumenzi has mentioned, we have trends, right? So trends can be derived from the ground, and then some trends will derive from the media, right? There's something that we talk about as we socialize, that does not exist in print, that does not exist in visual. You cannot see it on TV, you cannot see it anywhere else. Together. So the first one would be media, where it's a top-down approach. They tell us what is popular. Together. And then we have the bottom-up approach, whereby the people on the ground are the ones that take the trend. Right? Okay, thank you. And then, does popular culture inform resistance? But I want to start with this one first. So to deal with the norms, right? Does popular culture shape social norms? Or does social norms shape popular culture? Right? So what we do in society, the everyday life, is it the one that shapes what we then define as popular culture, or what do popular culture define what we do in our everyday life? Yes, so popular culture shapes?
No, it is shaped by what we do.
And then why are you saying that?
Because
was shaping, Nkosazana was shaping popular culture. Do you agree? You want to add?
No, I just wanted to say.
You want to add?
No, I was just saying, yeah.
Okay. Who else? Contrast. Different view from that. Who says that popular culture from top down is the one that defines what people perceive as social norm. Our everyday life is then shaped by what the media say.
Is it possible to say that it's a bit of both? Because firstly, it has to start with people coming up with a certain concept. It can be a group of people coming up with, oh, okay, we now wear certain pants a certain way. And then other people see that group of people and want to imitate whatever they're doing. And then it's popular culture now shaping social norms. But then it's coming from the media. It's what is already considered popular that shapes what am I saying? Okay, it is what the media says is popular that now shapes how people want to do things. But then if it's only just maybe a group of people, it's whatever they find popular that shapes how they go about social norms.
Thank you for that wonderful response. And thank you for your contribution as well. So what I hear from your responses is it has to do with people. People, right? And from Barbara's definition, he said that it's an everyday life, ordinary people. So my question to you is, who are these people? So we have a definition of popular culture as something of everyday life. Everyday life of who? Who are these people that we're talking about? That we're saying that we have a popular culture, we have equal time. Who are these equal time? Is it everyone in South Africa? Is it everyone who lives in cars, who lives in Makai? Who are these people? Where are they from? Yes.
I think it's like
Who are these popular people?
I would say they're not part of the community. I would say they're not part of the community.
Thank you. Yes, yes. From what I'm picking up from what you're saying is that targeted people. So now, are we then arguing that popular culture then has the ability to exclude people? Do we then say it is popular, even if it excludes people, to say that this Kotani is just a social grouping? I mean, say Alex, for example, and then it's popular Alex, but excluding everyone else, to identify what they are doing in Alex as popular culture. Isn't those, like those people that you're talking about, the targeted people whom they define as social culture, are those people not part of the elite?
Okay. Yeah. According to Ngũgĩ, in his
Yes.
she says that popular culture is often masses when analyzed in Western context. And that when you define popular culture and how it socializes or excludes certain groups, she says that it's like the elite form a popular culture that is global, but yet again, in our context, it's that popular culture can be only amongst a group of people and that can be considered as popular culture.
Okay. I want to bring it home. We have a group called Amapins. Does anyone identify with them? We have but you are aware of these people, right? Whatever that they're doing is trending, popular. You will then define the Kwelas because they are on TV, their lingo is on TV and everywhere else. You will then define the Kwelas as something that is popular, as part of the popular culture. Whereas we know that it is excluding everyone else who's not part of the Kwelas, who does not identify with the group of Kwelas. Because now, when we think of elite, we might be thinking of people who are wealthy, upper class, middle class, whatever, if we want to define it in terms of money. But we can also look at it from the perspective of people having different ideas, right? Are we together? So, then comes the resistance. Because whatever that you say is popular, then there would be people who would say, whatever that you are defining as popular is excluding us. Now together. So I am not a Kwela. So if the TV or media is imposing that in South Africa what is talking now is the Kwelas. But I'm like, I'm not part of the Kwelas. How is it popular if it's not popular to me and my friends? Are we together on that one? So now I want to go back to that question, to my first question. Does then popular culture inform resistance? Or does the resistance inform what is popular culture? Us, not being Kwelas, not being Amagqobana, when we try to fight against this perception of us using this umbrella approach and saying that we are all Amagqobana, we are all Amakwelas, when we are resisting that, another culture emerges as a resistance to that. Are we together? So, I want to hear from you. Then, what do you then see as this one comes first and this one comes last? Is it popular culture, then resistance, and then, or resistance, then popular culture? Remember what Baba said. She said, for the longest time, popular culture has been Western. When us as Africans were pushed sidelined, no one cared what we were doing. No one cared what was trending amongst us. So I want to hear your own views. How do you see that question? How do you then imagine popular culture in the realm of resistance?
Using the phenomenon, first phenomenon, say the national culture is born out of the struggle. So I would say resistance of popular culture, national culture, to use the phenomenon to get out of the culture.
Thank you. Ngũgĩ is saying that popular culture emerges from resistance and is quoting Ufandon. Anyone else?
I think it's the resistance that develops popular culture. Because you have to be against a certain idea for you to form a different idea, which now becomes popular culture. And then I'm going to use Inkinsela as an example. There is society, and then there is, what can I say, concepts around how you spend your money and how you do this, how you do that. Then resisting that system is their forming their popular culture, which is Inkinsela culture, where they burn money, they do this, they do that. And according to South African law, to burn money is illegal. So that is them resisting whatever the system says and doing what they want.
Yes, and imagine their own
Popular culture.
then saying that it emerges from resistance. Does anyone say that popular culture emerges from, resistance emerges from popular culture? Or is it a bit of both? Because going back to what Umis just said, it's a battle of ideas. Whichever group has the dominant idea at the time define what we call popular. And then once another group takes over, whatever their ideas are would then be defined as popular. It's just a label that can change from time to time. So if you were to go to the 60s, when Nina Simone was singing and all the other jazz artists were singing, they would define jazz as popular culture and as a form of resistance. And then fast forward, now you come to South Africa, you find Mary Makeba, you find Okuma Sigela, you find Amakowet, all those guys, they were defining whatever that they were doing as popular amongst them as African and as part of the resistance. Are we together? And then now, no one listens to jazz and then says it's popular now. Because that social grouping that identified jazz as popular is no longer there. It's just a small fraction now. And so we can also say Amapiano is part of a popular culture. But if you look at Amapiano, they are also resisting something. Right? Where for the longest time, the main music was coming from, or not for the longest time. There was a time where Durban took over with the Bongumenzi commercial music, and then Amapiano took over. And then if home now, they would then argue that we took it from house. The house would say we took it from quiet would say we took it from disco. Disco would say we took it from jazz. And then that's how we're defining social, popular culture as evolution, as people resisting something and creating something new. Right? So, but I want us to bring it home to language. There are ideas about language where for Bongumenzi to appear smart and to fit in. So a bit of a background. I'm coming from KZN, and where I come from, if you use one English word in your sentence, who tell like? You understand? What is like? We are supposed to look English. So that's where I'm coming from. When English, there's a perception of which, if you speak English, you are not part of us. You are part of them. Sinala, skulumis kas. Skulum veneka. What was to say like this? Aye, hambanada, hambanada, never. And then when you get into other groups, now I came to Johannesburg. Right? And then I wanted to assimilate with the culture around Johannesburg, be able to live peacefully with anyone. Right? So I had to take English as my immediate language of communicating. Because there's also that stereotype that, oh, let me language. Right? But there is then the stereotype against African languages, where if you speak Zulu, if you speak Xhosa, if you speak Sesotho, you are considered less intelligent. Right? Where does that come from? Because it's something that you can also define as somewhat of a popular thing. It's a popular culture where if you want to appear smart amongst your peers, you need to communicate with them in English. Even here, I got Kulu. But for the purpose of the lesson, we're communicating in English. But outside of this, if you were to meet a large viewer called, I don't know what you call the place, AUJ Citizen SS, if we were to meet by the shops there, and then it's just only us, black people, why is it that the first assumption is that this person must speak English? Where does that come from? Okay, so I want us to look at this tweet. The person was arguing with about coconuts and stuff. They call them coconuts, it's not me. Monolingual kids grow up to be frustrated on how they can't blend with their black peers, right? So you can read the rest of the tweet, but my one is the one that says, where I want, the point of discussion is this tweet. Why would I care if my kids can or cannot blend with hood rats? Right? So, then, now, this suggests that there's a notion that we can link hood rats. You can help us with the definition of hood rats. That we can link hood rats with speaking the name. Right? Because no one was talking about hood rats, they were just talking about language that people are supposed to be bilingual, multilingual, so that they can communicate wherever they go. But there's an assumption that if we have language, if my kids can speak Zulu fluently, then it means that they are part of the hood rats, right? So if I want them to succeed in life, I must do away even with their own language. So I want us to think about this. And from that tweet, can I see by a raise of hands who agree with that idea of saying that if your kid speaks the name, or if your kid can't speak the name, or if you are here and you cannot speak the name, it's because you don't want to blend with the hood. Anyone against the idea? Yes, miss. Yes, can I get your own opinion?
For me, I think language is important, whether it's English or Benin. And the assumption that if you're speaking Benin, you're a hood rat, for me it's wrong because we are not English people, if I may put it that way. Sorry. We have our own languages, and I feel like we should appreciate them, and yeah, we should appreciate our languages and not associate our languages with I don't know how to.
Yeah, but if you go to Sentin and you're looking for business opportunities, no one is going to speak to you in Benin. What's the need? Why do I have to teach my kids Benin? Who am I trying to achieve by having my kids, whom I've worked so hard that they grow up in Sentin? Then now, because you have your own opinions about language, now I must teach my kids language, your language.
At the end of the day, it's your choice as a parent. I'm not saying it's wrong for wanting your kids to speak English, but in my opinion, it's good to teach your kids Benin as well. But at the end of the day, it's your choice as a parent.
Okay? Yes, please.
I think it's important to continue teaching kids Benin. I think saying that teaching kids, I think saying that the language of the hood rat is that reproduces the same ideas that we feel by like the Western world, that our languages are not good enough, that our languages are not up to a certain standard. So we are continuously reproducing, then yes, it's a little difficult right now because in society to get to those positions, you do need to speak a certain language, and maybe if you're working there, speaking your home language may not be accepted. But I think teaching your children their home language is a step in the right direction to kind of resist those things that we've been taught.
Yes, meaning at the back of the deck. Okay, thank you, Nina. Definitely.
I think to piggyback off of what you said, that it's kind of that statement in and of itself reflects the way the Westerners and the colonizers try to conquer our minds, and the fact that it's a black person saying that to another black person. You might assume based on their angle that they also have an African name, right? But overall, I think it's important to teach your kids both languages. English is not as imperative, but our schooling system is based on that, so it becomes a necessity in that regard. But in terms of like socialization, our languages, our African languages carry identity. They carry who we were and who we are as people. You can't communicate certain things in English that you can in our other tongue. In terms of like people's culture, let's say for example, if you're talking about Umsami, you can't explain what that is in English, but when I say it, you know what it is because you speak my language. There's a book Ngũgĩ called Decolonising Mind, and some of the ideas he shares there is that one of the biggest successes of the colonial mission was to, like drill the idea of just like the sense of inferiority so much into black people that anything that is of theirs is like they see it. Black people are very anti-black themselves. So anything that is, you can associate with Africanness, you kind of see the lower gaze. So for instance, even in the aspect of spirituality, anything that is like too African is, demonic, or below, yeah. So the same thing goes with language. The extent to which we want to assimilate, because to many deeply colonized black people, as far as their minds at least, the idea of they aspire to be white. So because we've now come to see, okay, to be black means to suffer, to grow up in the hood, to be in, and to be white seems like it's a complete contrast of that. So anything that feels like a sense of assimilation to that. And another thing that I noticed is most black people who have this idea are newly working class or the emerging working class, So it would be people who themselves grew up in the hood, now they've got an apartment in Parktown and complete the island. So there would be that sense of, okay, to any extent to which we will kind of detach from where we're coming from, because middle class black people, which there aren't that many, I feel to some extent they'll have nannies who teach their kids their native languages, even if they're fluent in Zulu, but the more people who are emerging, or somewhat feeling like to whiteness by any means necessary, will try and assimilate to, yeah.
Thank you. I will close a little bit. But I don't. Okay, yeah.
I'm going to oppose on that idea a bit. Yeah, a bit. So, there's this poem I saw yesterday. It's a Muslim. She's talking about how, for her, speaking English was not about trying to sound smart or trying to be above the people that are in Islam with her. But it was a matter of being able to speak in places she never got the opportunity to speak into. She never got to speak in a certain place because of her language. She never got to express certain ideas because of her language. She never got opportunities because of her language. So it's a matter of this language is not based on, I want to sound smart, I want to sound richer than you, I want to sound this than you. But then we've been oppressed before. And the places that are high status, whatever, you're supposed to speak a certain language. And you get there, you speak Zulu, they're going to look at you like, they won't even take your idea because you're speaking it in Zulu.
Okay. So, I get you. I want to tie this argument with this. English is a form of what the colonialists, the Westerners, imposed as popular culture. They defined what blackness is for them as someone who can speak to us in our language, someone who would leave their barbaric ways of living and their savage lifestyles and assimilate, take up Christianity, and then make sure that they are in closer proximity to whites, but at the same time accept that they are inferior to us. Right? So, what then we have done over time is that we have refreshed these ideas so much so that then they seem natural. Right? If you go back a few hundred years back, you would see how English was imposed on natives. I mean, you remember even how the Americans ended up speaking the way they do, because they were not allowed to speak the name. So they ended up speaking as if they were singing, because the only thing that you were allowed to do in the fields or in the construction, you were allowed to sing, but not speak. So they ended up coming up with this certain style of speaking. So which is to say that even English now, we use English and say that, it's for convenience, because when I go for a job interview, because when I go to a room where it's full of white people, they won't hear what I'm saying. Even you, when white people go to your village, they can't hear, those people can't hear what people are saying. Right? And these are ideas that Fanon brings to forth and says that when you are assimilating, the meaning of assimilating is that we both compromise so that you have a common ground. But what the Englishmen or the Westerners have said is that we are not compromising anything, we are compromising zero. If you want to assimilate with us, you have to leave all your blackness and come to us. Right? If you have to be in that boardroom and then feel this panda sabo because you won't get the deal, I suggest you don't go anyways. If you have to hide your blackness in order to fit in, I suggest you are in the wrong room. Right? Where you have to then describe black people as hoodrat, just based on the basis of this person is speaking this language. He's speaking Venek, so I rule out anything that can come out from a person who's speaking Venek. All the wisdom, all the knowledge about Umsam or the knowledge about stars, just because it's coming from that language, it is considered an inferior knowledge system. Right? And then you have the person whom has been taught well enough to identify anyone speaking Venek as Hutret. Right? So, I want us then to go to resistance. And then some of you have already quoted Ufanon, who then defines resistance as a violent, transformative act against colonial oppression, right? And then remember, we have discussed that popular culture then emerges from what we know as resistance, or resistance is informed by popular culture, where people are resisting this form of popular culture. So now, when you see Java, when you see Big Zulu, that is a form of resistance. Where these ideas about English that we just discussed now, the fact that Java can go to, or Big Zulu can go to a news live, ENCA in the morning, being interviewed by a white person and still refuse to speak English, even though he knows small English, he speaks Zulu. So that is a form of resistance, right? And then if you see Itogamelisha going overseas, going to the UK, and then they were trying to interview him in English, and then he was saying that I'm not doing this interview unless you find someone who speaks Zulu with me. Because when Drake comes to South Africa, he will speak in English. No one would say, but the listeners of Ukos FM are Zulus. They would have to figure their way out. I've heard Chris Brown being interviewed because he was interviewed in English, like anyone else. If you go to their news, to their media outlets, you would have to then take English, right? But then they are not expected to compromise anything with them, right? So Ufanon defines it as a resistance. So I want to contrast Ufanon with Ubiko. Ubiko says resistance. He emphasizes that self-liberation through affirmation of black identity and unity using non-violent ways. I want us to highlight that one. Non-violent ways like community organizing and cultural pride to challenge white supremacy. Fanon is saying that it is a violent process. Ubiko says, you know what? We must find non-violent process. So from the two definitions, which one resonates with you? From the two definitions of resistance, which one? You know yourself to be a comrade or a non-comrade, you know, to take it to the streets. Can I start with you?
No, I think that's it.
Yes.
I don't believe that Ubiko says, one, the primarily psychological. I disagree. And I disagree on the non-violent part as well.
He wants
Ubiko, right? In the text where he's often referenced to how we write on a line. I think the idea, right, is to say, is to reveal rather, right, how all of this, or even in the process of decolonization, the psyche of the person, or not even, I think, okay, it's deviate, but I don't agree with, I don't think these two people's definitions of resistance or approaches to resistance are necessarily opposing each other. But I do agree that decolonization in its essence is a violent process. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to bring context, right? Ubiko had an opportunity to go and join the rest of the guys in MK, right? But he did not, because he had opposing views to what the MK was doing. He said, there's a way where we can mitigate and find common ground. Contrast to Ufanon, who was part of a liberation struggle. He went into a war zone. He was part of the struggle. He was sending these ideas at the time when Algeria was at, just after when they were about to be liberated. So when there was that violent fights, and remember his work, he went straight to Algeria to work with people who were ex-military people and who had like psychological issues with traumatic disorders of any sort. right? So now you can then argue to say that Ubiko is also, because Ubiko was inspired by Fano, same as the Roman complex. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention that these people existed at the time when there was a struggle which was fought in the battlefield, right? One had an opportunity to go and he did not, the other one had an opportunity to go, he did. So can I have other views? Which one do you identify your business?
Okay, I just want to preface this with saying I'm not encouraging people to do anything, but I think I would resonate with Fala's definition of resistance. People don't listen, you just sit down, and we've even seen it in history, like how we got to the point we were at. We didn't get here by people just sitting and be like, oh, like, please can you know? People actually had to stand up and actually kind of fight back those systems. We saw people protesting, things like that. Like, I feel like we need an active form of resistance. We can't be like passive about it. But I'm not saying.
Okay, can I just continue this class in Zulu? That's my form of resistance. Who is it? Yes, Miss, can I take you?
What you say is how far does that really get us? That's my question. How far does it get us? We should take that up.
Violence.
Because if I'm not mistaken, the system was a psychological thing. It was being constructed for a very long time and imposed to black people. And on this day on, it still has an effect on us.
Okay. Can I take who we set up here?
I agree with her because it's not violent enough in people, I mean, look at cases of today, the Turkish cases, there were no strikes, nothing was going to happen. Right now, the Russia case, it's quiet because we're not saying anything, we're not doing anything, we're not acting violently, that's why people are quiet about it. So if you act violently, then that's when they listen. That's when they listen to us.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question in terms of some people that agree with that? I'm not saying that you're wrong or anything, but like, for example, you're saying that you feel as though violence or resistance is inherently violent, right? So do you feel like resistance is only impactful and successful if it is violent? No.
Okay. Can I take who we name this? Due to time, can I then just, you get the opportunity, I'll start with you, Miss, on the following slide. So to say that both theorists are correct. Ufanon is correct, Ubiko is correct. This is because if we all assume that we should take the violent struggle, we lose what is valuable about our society because everyone is fighting. And if those people die during the struggle, then what are we fighting for? What are we fighting to preserve? Right? Ubiko is saying that at the same time others might take the liberation struggle through violent means, but others should be there to protect the ideas. Right? So to say ukuthi uKhrisani is equally important as uHugh Masekela. uKhrisani is in the battlefield as a commander of MK. uHugh Masekela has a trumpet, just preserving our African history through music, right? So we can then argue that one is taking violent mean and then the other is taking the non-violent mean. So to say that the one that we are looking at today, Inkinsela yaseMgungundlovu, the rich man of Maritzburg, is part of the non-violent means of struggle, right? Of which it has of equal importance as the violent one. So we cannot rule out the non-violent mean, because the very same impiase sandwane lo khuluma ngayo, if all Dube Babengeko and all the other people Magema Fus to preserve isiZulu through writing, they would have died as Sandwane. And how are we then supposed to know what happened in history? Should Sibusiso Nyembezi, the one that we are looking at today, went to war, went and joined the MK, who would have written about isiZulu? Who would have preserved what we today know about isiZulu if he took the violent way? But this is not to rule out that the people who went to join the MK or the APLA or the POP are not equally important. Right? So we must leave room for both. You understand, Miss? Or to Fanon all the way. Okay, I want to bring Ngũgĩ man. So Ngũgĩ then talks about dismemberment and rememberment, right? We must remember and we must dismember, right? So to say that during this resistance and this struggle of creating new popular culture that represent us as the ordinary people, we must then dismember. We must be able to take out all the negative connotation that comes with English. To say that we are speaking English so that we are instilling the idea that we are inferior, we must dismember that. We must dismember all the negative stuff that comes with speaking English and the inferiority complex that Sibusiso is talking about. We must dismember. And then we must remember what we then lost due to colonization. Today, and in today's context, it is a perfect example of how popular culture is used to remember. So now, you won't be surprised if Ngũgĩ sang, because we have made it a popular thing not to have stereotype against them. Not to say, you are accepted as part of the society. What is Sutu Sami Pelela Gudumela? Okay. So, then, now, I think we understand the concept of remember and dismember. Right? So, we dismember, we remember to restore it's a restorative process of reclaiming African wholeness, reviving indigenous languages. So the process of intentionally using these languages. So if you come across me in an elevator, never expect hello from me. It's sawubona. Whether you're black, white, Indian, everyone. And what I've noticed in most cases, when I say hello to black people, they respond. When I say hello to white people, they respond. But when I say hello, sanbonani, it's only blacks who respond. So I'm asking myself, how are you in an African country and you do not understand the first word of encounter? How is it that Dumela, Locha, Avusheni, how do you then live for the longest time here, living through our resources, and you still don't understand the Sawubona? So that's where this thing, where we have to dismember that. We have to then dismember and say, good, the assimilation process that took place some years ago, before we were even born, it did not take place in the right way. We must dismember all the aspects of it which we feel they are not right. You must not expect me to go an extra mile to accommodate you while you are not doing anything to accommodate me. So Ngũgĩ talks about that. And then I wanted us to also consider class struggle and internalized colonialism, which Steve Biko would then say would internalized racist colonialism is inferiority complex, where the psychological domination. Remember, uNdlovu Katsheni would then quote Walter Minolo in saying that colonialism is not over, but it's all over, right? And then we have decolonized, right? Which means now we have dismantled these institutions, these physical institutions. By the fact that we are here at the University of Wits and we are speaking about this topic, it means that the process of decolonization has been successful. What we are now have to move towards is the process of decoloniality, where we are dismantling these psychological structures. Where for you to be perfect, to be a perfect vet student, you have to lose some of your blackness. And that's why even things such as ingoma, or when students who are part of the ZCC church are having their own ceremony here at school, it's very important because that is part of what? Decoloniality. Remember, before then, if I was to start singing now, Kuzizaka Nezisho Ngide, that would be part of blackness, which does not associate with faith, does not associate with these institutions, right? But now we can do it, and we can self-claim our black pride. Are we together? So, and then the class struggle emerges because there are these two opposing forces. Remember, at the beginning of our conversation, we talked about how there is that roller coaster, the ups and downs between the exchanges between what is popular culture and what is not popular culture, not popular culture. The dominant group at the time defines what is popular. So during the class struggle, whichever class is dominant, then they are the ones that define what is popular. Even though it's not the life of the ordinary people. You can then see a headline from New York Times saying that Africa has listening to Afrobeats. But there are only 2 people in South Africa listening to Afrobeat. But they are saying the whole of Africa. So the dominant mob at the time This is not to reduce the Afrobeat's impact, but it is to then argue that are they looking at the people on the ground, or are they just looking at the dominant group in Africa and saying that the whole of Africa, from Cape to Cairo? Naibon. So then the class struggle, then it's a revolutionary conflict in a colonial context where oppressed masses confront the colonizer and conflict native bourgeoisie. So then violence is central to dismantling colonial hierarchies and preventing neocolonialism with the peasantry as the backbone. Decolonizing is a meeting of two forces opposed to each other by their very nature. For the fact that you are imposing a certain culture or you are imposing something as popular culture, then our point of meeting, then we would argue on that, then we would fight on that. The fact that you have to leave some of the things that defines who you are in order to assimilate to this popular culture, then it means that at that point of encounter, then you will fight. Are we together? And then the colonized are made to admire the colonizer's culture, despise their own, creating a psychic conflict, a new class hierarchy based on the proximity to whiteness or Western culture. Just because we are closer to Sentin now, we are speaking English, but that's a conversation that would take for long. So I want us to quickly move on to Sibusiso Nyembezi and Inkinsela yaseMgungundlovu. So Sibusiso Nyembezi was born in 1919 and died in 2000. He was a Zulu novelist, poet, scholar, and teacher. He resigned from the University of Fort Hare in 1959 in protest against the racial divisive policies being enforced by the apartheid regime. And then he went to work at Shooter & Shooter, where he would later on publish the book Inkinsela yaseMgungundlovu alongside many other books that they were publishing at Shooter & Shooters. Right. So looking at Inkinsela yaseMgungundlovu, Inkinsela yaseMgungundlovu is written by Sibusiso Nyembezi. It follows Usisinde Benkulu, a cunning urban conman posing as a wealthy benefactor who deceived the rural community into entrusting him with their cattle and saving, promising high profit. Highly flashy demeanor and mixed English-Zulu speech initially swayed the naive villagers, but young, educated members exposed his fraud. The novel is humorous critique to urban rural divide. So, how is the novel relevant to popular culture? It's a key example of Baba's popular culture. The novel, published by Shooter & Shooter, gained massive popularity, becoming a staple in South African education and spanning a widely watched 1996 SABC TV adaptation. Its accessibility and humor made it a cultural phenomenon resonating with millions, as described by Baba. It exemplifies people's culture as organic, a bottom-up expression of everyday life through satire and Zulu storytelling. It resists colonial expression and foster community pride, aligning with Baba's view of popular culture as non-elite subversive force against top-down commodification. So then what you can then note from those is that it is part of what was popular amongst Africans, and it's a form of resistance. We have already seen from the bio of the writer that he was a resistor himself. He was an activist himself. But if you then compare the two contrasting views of how to resist, you would then say that he aligns most with what would then later Steve Biko say. as non-violent means, because instead of just resigning from his duties and then going to the Umkhonto weSizwe and fighting, of which it was not established at the time, or suggesting similar ways, he then decided to protest in form of a novel. And for the fact that he wrote his novel in Zulu, it was a form of a protest, because now he was challenging the stereotype that for someone to be smart, for someone to be a professor, a lecturer, or a doctor, they must speak English. They must have a good command of the language. Are we together? So in the book, we find undertones, even though they are not blatant that this is a resistance, but we find undertone whereby he's poking at the colonial regime, he's poking at the dominant culture at the time. So, fun fact about this book, it is still the prescribed book for grade 10 in 2025. It was published in 1961 and it was adapted for schools in 1965. So if you would ask your grandmother if they started schooling then, around the 1960s, they will tell you they were reading this book. So it's a generational book, which is a very phenomenal book, and I don't think it should be taken out of the schooling system. That's my own view. So how does then this book represent language and power? So you find that Mkhwanazi's amazed by Ndebenkulu's English demonstrates a colonial mindset where European languages are seen as superior. So you find him saying Ngũgĩ, he described himself as Esquire ngesiZulu, right? Esquire, so is a wealthy man, and then Themba. And then there's this culture of mocking people just because they don't understand certain English words. Or if I were to say a certain word and then pronounce it horribly, and then there's that culture of laughing. Right? So it is as old as time. It did not begin today, because it then reinforces that how is English, but then you do not expect your counterparts to have a good command of your own language, whereas you have high expectations of that. And then Ndebenkulu's performance, his dialogue is pepped with English words to impress and assert authority. So even some of us, when you are arguing with your grandmother at home, and then you say, but Granny, this is not cool. Just to assert that authority, to say, hey, phela sekuphikisana ngesingisi lokho. Yabo? Uberekisha sikhuwa. Khulwa lina. Ayibona leyo nto leyo. So those are some of the issues that are there in the book, which is then to say that this thing of us praising people just because they have a good command of English needs to stop. We need to we need to reimagine those ideas. We need to reimagine how we have popularized that. And then we find the two. Remember, Biko Fanon was talking about how the natives, we would fight, but end up with natives who would then assimilate or take up the bourgeoisie cultures and ideas and come and impose those ideas to black people. The very same person, the white person, you won't find the white person laughing at you because you can't speak English. You know why? He doesn't have to do it. He doesn't have to laugh, because the black person will laugh at you on his behalf. So then we find Themba, and then we find Mkhwanazi. So these are two black people who are, then the one is the conformist and then the one is the rebel. So the one is conforming to the time and the social norms of the time, which then divides the popular culture, whereby Umkhwanazi was really praising Undebenkulu. And remember, Ufanon said that he admired black people who are in closer proximity to whiteness. So, because Undebenkulu said he was coming from Pietermaritzburg, and Pietermaritzburg at the time was the capital of the Natal colony, right? And then, because of that, he was in closer proximity to whites. And he gained the respect just because he said he knew white people. Never. So we find Themba being skeptical in almost several occasions. I don't know, but there's something amiss about Undebenkulu. That is on page 67, 58. And then during the wagon ride, so that's the first few pages of the book where Themba was supposed to go and fetch Undebenkulu from the train station. And then Undebenkulu was having a rant about the type of, the mode of vehicle that, the mode of transport that they went to fetch him with. He was expecting them to come with a car, but they came with a wagon pulled by donkeys. And then he was calling it a box. And then Themba, thinking that at home, at least we have this box. No one else in this area has this box that you are calling a box. So, and then he was having a field day with him on that one. And then he brings a newspaper. So there's a newspaper that was circulating where he was schooling, where a guy by the name of Imlomo had conned a widow. And then after the husband has passed, and then he took all the cattle. He came with this newspaper article, and then he showed his father, but his father, as the conformist, respecting this person because he's in closer proximity to white people, he then decided to ignore that part, right? And then he dismissed his son, his critical perspective. You have no reason to be worried, my son. That is what he said. It's on page 124. Okay, and then also in the book, we find how people then popularized silencing women. Right? So, in the book, the novel critiques a patriarchy by showing how Mkhwanazi ignore intuitive wisdom of the women in his life, uMaNtuli noThoko, his daughter, who was skeptical of Undebenkulu from the start. I still can't understand why he chose our house. Maybe your father will put us in the picture once this man has explained things to him. But even in that case where uMaNtuli was questioning, why is this man here? Why does he want to take the inheritance of my kids? Why did he choose us? Why? He chose Mkhwanazi as the man. He chose to ignore all of that. Even uThoko, the daughter, he engaged with the man. He saw the man around her house, and then he was skeptical. But they chose to ignore her. Right? So then we have this thing of this notion of men listen to men. If you want to speak sense to me, then it's better be a man. A woman cannot speak sense to a man. Women talk to women, men talk to men. We have those stereotypes, of which it's something that has been popularized in our societies. And then, due to resistance, remember that we said that popular culture informs resistance, resistance informs popular culture. Then, due to this, then emerges what? Feminism. Where now women are saying that we are taking a central position to say that enough is enough. Are we together? And then the shift of wealth So now we consider people who having cattle and land back at home not so wealthy, but we judge the wealth. We judge the wealth on the basis of your capital balance. Yabo? That's a very good example of dismember, the idea of dismember by Ngũgĩ wa Thiong'o. You're poking the right question, Dr. Which is to say that when we look at history, it's unfortunate that we have been told the well-documented history is based off the women of high status in black societies. So we would look at Queen Mujaji, we would look at Kabai, of which then my response to that would face the critique where they're not subjected to a special privilege just because they were the daughter's king, the king's daughter. Yeah, but so that's the first one. But if we look at how they were treated, nevertheless, you would find that Kabai was able to talk to her father direct. They had that father-daughter relationship to such an extent that Kabai was able to go to her father, and then suggest a wife. And not only suggest, bring the wife to the home, and then the father agreed. So that is evidence to that the father-daughter relationship has always been there. And another cultural phenomenon, during a wedding, a father is supposed to lead the daughter to her. Yes, thank you. So now, how would then a stranger lead this person? Because during this process, they're supposed to confirm if you are comfortable, if you want to do this, if you want to change your mind. That's the whole idea behind this thing of having a male figure leading you to your husband, just to make sure that should you say that no, I'm changing my mind, then you go back. So that would be my response to your question, Dr. to say that there has been a father-daughter relationship, but my evidence is based off a princess. So then someone would argue if it was the case for ordinary human during that time. And then we would have to then look at oral history and other stories for such evidence. Yes, daughter?
So,
It can be argued that it's a colonial thing because of how a family is structured in a Zulu household or in an African household, not a Zulu household alone. Because if you consider how many wives a man would have in the family, in the same place, so you have 4 wives in different houses, and they are the ones controlling the means of production. Remember, a man was not going out to work. The house or the homestead had every resources that they need, right? They had a garden outside where they farm. They had their cattle here. They had everything here, controlled by uNdlunkulu, the main wife. So there's also that aspect to put into consideration. And then with colonialism came the nucleus family system, whereby it was then said, no, do away with the structure. Just build one house where you'd have these different bedrooms. It would be your bedroom, your son's bedroom, your daughter's bedroom, then finish. You and your wife here, you see. So that also dismantled how a family structure, an African home, family structure is built up. So we also have to dismember that and everything that came with that. And then also remember, this is not to say that now, just because I'm having this argument, then I'm saying that we should all go back to having this term. You understand? But I'm saying that all the things that came with this nucleus family system, where it was the father, the wife, the daughter, the son, the daughter, it came with colonialism. In an African household, that was not the thing. It was the father, the wife, the wife, the wife, the wife. So now, looking at the relationship between two people who are in a relationship and how they usually communicate. So do you think for women that this guy is insanely in love with would not be able to dictate his direction? If you have 5 wives and they are all in sync, they're living in harmony, they're working their land, they're having their chickens, they all work and then share resources amongst them. Because this thing of his team, fight within his team, only came when the husband was supposed to leave to Johannesburg and work and send the main wife money. And then the main wife was supposed to distribute. Already the father has a mkukunyana in Soweto. So already the resources that are distributed back at home are not enough to support every household. Right? So these are all the dynamics that shape now and how we now perceive Istembu, how we perceive African life as a whole, how we perceive Uguye Makaya, how we perceive. So for people who are coming from KZN, now they want to be permanent residents of Gauteng, or people who are coming from Free State or Limpopo who want to be permanent residents of Gauteng, or some want to go back. They have their reasons, but their reasons are not informed by them, but they are informed by history and trends and the ideas that have transcended to this point. Are we together on that one? Okay, I want to finish this analysis and then I'll have your questions in 2 minutes. Okay, so you find that there's a shift of wealth. So what we Africans were defining as wealth was then shifted to say that no, you must have a bank account. But till this day, no one ever understands the system of banking. Unless you are doing accounting or related courses to banking, then you would have a full grasp of how banking and saving and investment happens. But everyone here knows that if you have one cow, then it would give birth to another cow. And if you want to invest, you must take this cow and then go breed it somewhere. It would come back pregnant, and then you get another one. You can exchange it for 2 goats. You can exchange it. We understand that system. Right. But now we are then convinced to do away with those systems and then adopt the new ones, which is to bank. So you find in the book that Undebenkulu is selling this idea of his savings in the bank. And then he specifically says that people like us who live in the city do not care much about a cow with 4 legs, hair, and horns. Our cow stays in the bank. But now, with the African reawakening, the African Renaissance, of which I would then say it is this period, you've seen that most people now have this aspiration to buy cattle, to buy land, to do farming, you see. So that is a form of realigning our history and repopularizing what was lost due to colonialism. Are we together? And then, okay, so the novel as popular culture, this tale does not warn about the loss of culture, but celebrates the sense of community that apartheid assaulted. So within the book itself, we find that even though there were these social struggles that were happening within Inkinsela yaseMgungundlovu, then we find that the community at last, they were able to come together in a certain idea to say that we are rejecting this fraudster. And they were not only rejecting Undebenkulu, they were also rejecting colonialism as a whole. To say that everything that Undebenkulu was selling to them, they then reject, because they did not say, Undebenkulu is a fraudster, we would find someone else who was Zinko, so that we continue with the ideas he was selling. They said, we are not selling our cows anymore. We want to preserve what was lost between us. Outside the book, we see that even though there was this oppressive regime of apartheid in South Africa, we see that black people in particular, they were able to preserve what was important about them being black. So this book is an example of that, right? So, popular culture is the site of struggle. Inkinsela yaseMgungundlovu is a prime example of how popular stories can be a powerful vehicle for decolonial resistance and remembering. So, my closing question again: how does popular culture inform how people perceive life, event of history, present and future? The autonomy of choice and liberation. This is a very lengthy question, of which the question that I wanted us to discuss, but due to time, we won't be able to delve much into it. But it's a point of reflection on how we as society have crafted our ideas, have made or forged this popular culture, equal time, the Boilers, Samabinga, all those people, right? Not leaving anyone else behind, saying that we have crafted our identities based on how life has been presented to us, how ideas have been transported from this point of history to the present, right? So if you say that you speak English because you want to communicate with a wider audience, is it because of your own choosing, or is it something that was predetermined by history? That in 2025, any black person who wants to connect with the rest of the world would have to speak English. Is it something that we need to do in future, where if you want to sell an idea, you won't be able to sell it unless you speak it in English? How the autonomy of choice, do we really have a choice in what we define as popular culture? Do we have a say in that? Please.
Thank you. This is supposed to be a translated. Now, like I said, if you are not here tomorrow, and there's no letter saying that you are sick and then or you are gone, you are dead, whatever,
was here every week. You guys have been so wonderful and very engaging. When I was preparing this presentation, I was very scared if these ideas would be for you would be seeing them for the first time, but it shows what we are really moving forward. Keep it up. Thank you for your Ella, and thank you everyone for participating. For those that have come back, thank you for the